But it's such a delight to be here. Such a delight. It's always a delight to be with you. I just love you very much. And thank you. Thank you. My wife had knee surgery. Pastor Don knows all about knee surgeries. And so I asked him for some tips. And he says, well, just you bend it, then you go a little bit more, then you go again, a little bit more. And I gave that tip to my wife. So she's working on it. She's working on it, yes. She sends her love and greetings. And, you know what kind of pastors you have, right? This is not a secret. Everybody that knows them knows their commitment to the Lord, their commitment to do it God's way, and so on and so forth. And so, somebody was talking about retirement or whatever. No, sir. See, yeah, because, you were a brother, then you were a pastor, and then now somebody mentioned shepherd, and then somebody mentioned father. Well, when you become a father, everything changes. You might be a peer with some of the young folks at 35, and then you are their brother pastor. But now you are a father. And fathers relate different than others to children. They are a father. They're there through thick and thin. The children come always first. They're there to fill the bellies of the children, and so on and so forth. This is, and so I'm going to give you a very simple, the short version of a very simple message that is simple only in theory, but in practice it is very difficult. And I've seen this in the lives of Pastor Don and Sister Marva. So I'm talking a lot about love today. What is agape love? Agape love is the kind of love that the Holy Spirit produces in the life of a Christian. Yes? And only He can produce it. And but when you say something like that, then people are always wondering, well, what does that look like? All right, so I want to give a few ideas. One, if you say that you love somebody, my definition sort of is that you do the things for the well-being and welfare of the one that you say that you love. Yes? You can do things for your well-being and welfare. That's okay. But then you cannot say that you love the other person. Then you love yourself. And that's cool, except you cannot say that you love the other person. Yeah, you love yourself. And that's cool, because if you love yourself pretty good, then you can love other people as well. But it is about the other person. And that is the thing that comes to me all the time when I think of Don Leavell and Marva Leavell. It is about the other person. It is not about them. They always put other people first. You check it out. Check it out in your mind. How long you've known them, and if this is not true. And this is my experience, because I've known them before the church was here. Yes. And that has been true all along. So all the things that people have said on the tape and so are true. But it is because they put people first before themselves. And that's huge. That is Christ-like. That is Christ-like. And so you are fortunate to have such shepherds for so long. You don't know how the average length is of pastors? 3-4 years. And I think I was generous. Yes. 3 or 4 years, you haven't even started pastoring yet. You get acquainted with the folks. They get acquainted with you. They check you out. You check them out. Then now you start learning some needs that they have and some needs that their families have. And then you start pastoring. So they have pastored and fathered and mothered for a long time. So what does it look like? So let me make a couple of points over here. Love. To love like Jesus should be the goal of every serious Christian. To love like Jesus loves. And nothing else matters all that much. Because if you don't love like that, then things now are turning inward rather than outward. With the love of Jesus, it's always about the other person. So we'll look at John 13, 34, and 35 real quick. We don't have a lot of time, but I want to make some points, though short, and then I'm done. Yes. A new commandment I give to you. So check it out. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. So quickly, he says a new commandment. So apparently there was an old commandment. Yes? Otherwise you cannot speak of a new commandment. The old commandment love was sort of like the 50-50 kind of a love. Love your neighbor as yourself. But the new commandment kind of love is not like that. It's 100% kind of love. If you have a loaf of bread and you love the other person, you give the other person the loaf of bread. In a 50-50 kind of love, you cut it in two, half, and then, 50-50. All right? And then in my country they say, whoever slices the bread, the other person gets to choose. Because it's hard to cut it all in half. You cheat a little bit over here. They get... Yes. And you... that you love one. As I have loved you. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples. So, a disciple is not a convert. A disciple is somebody who's a serious follower of Jesus Christ, right? You might be a convert today, or you're a convert 2 weeks ago, then you are not quite a disciple quite yet. Right? You haven't learned the things that make you a disciple. So this is, he says that by this shall all men know that and that you are my disciples. This, what is this? It is the new commandment kind of a love. By this they will know that you are his disciples. So, till you display this kind of love, exhibit this kind of love, for it to be not just love like, ooh, in the sky, ooh, love, but a love that is visible, demonstrative, can be experienced by people, then, they don't know that you are a disciple of Jesus Christ. So, one. Two, love, where I'm looking from, might be more a decision than an emotion. Right? Because when you make the decision to obey the Lord, the Holy Spirit will flood your soul with love for that person. Because you see, when Jesus is saying to love your enemies, it is not like your heart is overflowing with a love emotion for this person. I mean, he's your enemy or she's your enemy. But you, in obedience, you make that decision, that choice to love that person, God will give you that love for that person. Because after all, he wants to win that person also for his kingdom. And it is one enemy less, whatever. Thirdly, I want to say, love has maybe more to do with the other person's flaws than their good side. Let me explain to this. Because Jesus says that, to love somebody that loves you, to be friendly to somebody that's friendly to you, even the pagans can do that. But it counts really when the other person is not that lovable. That is when it counts. But typically I find that as Christians, we look for soft targets, the ones that are easy to love. And the ones that are not so easy to love, we let them go. But it is strange to me, as a coach, what I have experienced is that if you give easy opponents to your tennis students, the easy ones, they look good, but they're not improving. They just look good, but they're not improving. You got to give them some challenges. You got to give them some stronger opponents so they can improve their game. And this is what God does to us. We don't recognize it. We don't recognize that God is training us. He wants to improve our love. This is the kind of things that I found and have been finding for many, many years. Over 35 years in, I say Donna Marva, Pastor Don and Sister Marva. This is what you find. No soft targets. Because let me tell you something. If you have a church this size, there are lots of not so soft targets. It's true. It's not that it's a bad thing, because some people are young Christians and they need to be cultivated. They need to be loved. And this is the kind of love that will change people's lives. That's what it is. Because they can see it. They can experience it. They don't have to have a Bible study about it. Ultimately, the Bible study comes, or the Bible study can come first. But if it's not shown, it's just a Bible study. It's just head knowledge. So this is the type of thing that I'm finding in their lives. Your love will be challenged. Again, in a church this size, your love will be challenged. And then the question is, love is patient, love is kind. Does it show up? Does it show up? So, and in their lives, it is, no, they are not perfect people. They are flawed like all of us. But there is a consistency in their lives about these things, about putting other people first in every way. In every way. We're gonna continue. In Romans 12:9a, it says, love must be sincere. That intrigued me when Paul says, love must be sincere. Of course it must be sincere. But then my mind went, why does Paul say that? Is it not logical? So I'm thinking that there were some people that thought that they were really loving, but their love was not so sincere. So Paul is making the point, no, if there's going to be love, it must be sincere. The King James says, it must be without hypocrisy. Hypocrisy means play acting. You're play acting the part, but it's not real. Acting. Hypocrisy. You remember a guy named Keith Lawrence? I love Keith Lawrence. He and Julie had the Grace House Ministries. And Keith Lawrence. And he told me one time when they were doing the ministry, he says he would go to the jail here often to interview, to meet some of the ladies there behind the bars. And so one morning he went, and the lady says, "Do you get paid to come here?" He says, "No, I take the day off. It costs me a little something. I pay for my own gas and it costs me a little something." And then she called the other lady, "Hey guys, come over here, come over here. This is the real thing. He's the real thing." Yes, what was she checking out? Are you here for me? Or are you here for you? And when you're here for me, not for yourself, but for the other person, that makes all the difference in the world. All the difference in the world. It is not that you couldn't get paid. It is that when you don't get paid, the argument is over. There's no more talking necessary. Mute. It's over. It's clear that you're not there for you to get paid, but you're there for the ladies. And so, my experience has been that Pastors Donna Marva, they were always there for the other person. This is my personal experience also. Always there for the other person. So remarkable. It's just like Jesus. I came across a word that got me pondering. I'm a ponderer. Are you a ponderer? Yeah, I know that you are, Pastor Don. A ponderer, sitting and just thinking about something. This word, consideration, got my attention. Consideration. And I thought to myself, Wow. Consideration. You don't find that a lot. You don't see that a lot. But when somebody has consideration for somebody else, that is a clear sign that there is a message from Christ sent. That something that the other person is not really entitled to, but you give it to them anyways. Yes? I told you my wife has knee replacement. So when she comes home, they tell me, "You're it, Kenny." She can't do anything for herself. Nothing. And she couldn't. Even when we walked, and she walks with a walker, there's a belt around her waist that I get to hold. So to protect her from falling, because the last thing you want to do when you have knee replacement is fall. That'd be a disaster. Take her to the bathroom. I mean, everything. So one morning, I like to drink hot tea in the morning. So one morning, I made me a nice cup of hot tea. And Sybil needed some things, and I went on my business. And 3 hours later, I find myself, I'm walking and say, "Oh, I saw now a cup of cold tea." Sort of strong. And the Lord spoke to me, says, "That's how it is. It's not about you. It's about her." It's about her. So, the idea of consideration is very, very prevalent in the scriptures. It is not always called, or it is rarely called, by the name consideration. But nevertheless, that idea is all over the place. 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 8, chapter 8, 9, and 10 are almost exclusively about consideration of the other person. Chapters 14 and 15 in the book of Romans, almost exclusive about consideration of the other person. In all the epistles, Paul is mentioning the idea of consideration of the other person. In the book of Acts, and that's where I want to just park for just a little bit. In the book of Acts, we have several ideas of consideration, and I want to share a couple with you. And then show you how this idea of consideration, Pastor Don and Sister Martha have made come alive in me without me realizing that it was consideration. You follow what I'm saying? I didn't have a name for it per se, but the idea was there. The example was there in their lives. But now I realize it's consideration. So we look in the book of Acts, we have the idea that in chapter 10 that the gospel gets opened to the Gentiles. Yes? In chapter 16, we find that after Paul and Barnabas had taken their first missionary trip, they started in the church of Antioch. They ended up back in the church of Antioch. They went there, back in Antioch. The church was doing great, but then some false teachers had slipped in. And they said that, Judaizers, they said that you cannot be saved unless you are circumcised. And then later on they added also the law of Moses. So, the church in their wisdom, wanting to maintain unity, which is, without unity, I heard the word unity this morning. It is a huge word. Without unity, you don't have much. But with unity, there's a lot of things. And unity is facilitated by consideration. So, the wise men in the church of Antioch then decided that we're going to send Paul and Barnabas to the church in Jerusalem, where the apostles were. And the apostles, of course, are the authority of the big C, the big church, worldwide, so to speak. And then, certainly at that time. And then you had, of course, the elders of the church in Jerusalem. And the church in Antioch wanted them in Jerusalem to make that decision and send a delegation to Jerusalem for this to be discussed. And then you have what they call the Council of Jerusalem. And during that council, it is decided that no, faith alone in Christ alone. You don't have to be circumcised. You don't have to keep the law of, you can, but it's not a requirement for salvation. Are you with me? Okay. So, it is decided, and then James speaks. James, the stepbrother of Jesus, the author of the epistle of James, the leader of the church in Jerusalem, and he makes a suggestion. He says, okay, this is what I suggest, that we write a letter to the church in Antioch and explain to them what we have come up with, but there is 4 things that I want to bring to the table that we are going to ask them to give consideration because of the fact that they are going to minister and have fellowship with Jewish brothers and Jewish unbelievers. Are you following me? So the four points that of consideration that James was asking for was, 1, that they abstain from things that were offered to idols. 2, that they would abstain from sexual immorality. Well, you have to abstain from sexual immorality, whether a believer, a Jewish believer, or a Gentile believer. So you have to investigate that. And in my study, I found that the sexual immorality over there had to do with, in the book of Leviticus, when it speaks to marriage customs that people had, in that a brother would marry a sister, and a father a daughter, and a mother a son. No, that they would abstain from them. And that they would also abstain from eating meat of animals that were just strangled, whose blood was not drained out of them. And then 4thly, that they would not drink blood. Now, if this was not a prohibition, this was a suggestion of consideration that when you minister to Jewish folks, give this the consideration. Abstain from these things. Yes? It is like when you are ministering to a devout Hindu who thinks that a cow is a sacred animal, and you're going to share Jesus with them over lunch, and you order a steak. Okay? You lost your ministry. You see what I'm saying? You lost your ministry. So, you have to be careful not to interpret those 4 abstentions. How do I call it? Did I say it? Abstentions. Those that you don't consider them requirements for salvation. Okay? They are already saved, these folks. He's just saying these are 4 considerations that we're asking you to exercise when you are in ministry with Jewish folks. Now, remember, the Gentiles were exposed, the gospel was opened to the Gentiles in the 10th chapter of the book of Acts, and now we find ourselves in the 16th chapter. This was not that long ago. So these Gentiles are asked for consideration of the Jewish brethren, and the point I'm trying to make is this, that you don't have to be a mature Christian to give consideration. But we must give consideration. We must give consideration. Then, we go to, I say the 16th chapter, I probably meant the 15th chapter. The 16th chapter, then, Paul comes across a guy named Timothy. Timothy had a good reputation, a good testimony among the brethren that in Derbe and whatever the other place was. Yeah? Okay. Derbe and, I'm old, 74, so I forget sometimes. And Lystra. Derbe and Lystra. There was Timothy. A good reputation, a good testimony among the people. He had a Jewish mom and a Greek father, which, biblically, today in Israel, your Jewishness is determined by your mother. Okay? But biblically, your Jewishness is determined by your father. So, but because his father was Greek and the Greeks were not necessarily fond of circumcision, it was known that Timothy was not circumcised. So check this out. Paul wants Timothy to travel with him. Chop. I didn't mean to be so visible. Ow! And in the Old Testament, they did it with a stone. I don't know what they did it with Paul and Timothy. But the issue was this, that Timothy is asked to give consideration because they were going to minister, and it says it right there in the scriptures. It is because he was asked to be circumcised because of the Jewish brethren that were there. So that he would have a ministry among the Jewish people. When they knew that he was circumcised, then now their hearts are opened up, right? You understand what I'm trying to say? So, you know, have you ever made a consideration like that? Okay? So what I'm saying is that this is the type of characteristics and traits that I've seen in Pastor Don and Sister Marva, that they give great consideration. Consideration, yes. Consideration is a form of grace. You might say maybe graciousness. And their lives are a life of grace and graciousness. Yes. And consideration. So when people have consideration, I'm gonna make it. When people have consideration, then consideration is hand in glove with the idea of humility, the idea of unity, the idea of wisdom, the idea of joy and fellowship. Those things and more. Your church is named The Fellowship for a reason, because there is fellowship. Just because your name says The Fellowship doesn't mean there is fellowship. But here there is fellowship because of all these different factors that you have: humility, love, consideration. So let me just try to finish up here a little bit and say this: I have by my own experience experienced the consideration of you, Brother Don and Pastor Don and Sister Marva. You teach the whole fellowship about consideration. I'll make myself a little bit more clear here in a second. Every possible Christian organization that needs a facility, you give them consideration. Excuse me. Less than a week ago, on Monday night, here met Young Life. 300 people. They had a goal of $80,000. They exceeded the goal. Yes. Great consideration of another Christian organization that needs some help. Who did they come to? Who did they come to? Pastor Don. And you can describe him with all the words that were used on the video, and then some. And when I describe him to people, I say, go talk to him. He is a very kind and generous man. Go talk to him. I'm finishing up. When it comes to the TFI, it's because of his consideration and their love for other folks. It is not that they have such an advantage from the other folks. No, it cost you, and they have trained you, they have taught you by example about generosity so that the church can help support the TFI. It is not because they're getting so much out of it. It is because they want to share Christ with the world. So it is not about us. It's about them. Once again. And so the way every person involved in is treated every step of the way here. While they are here and while they are not here. You give them consideration. I've seen the lunches that were offered to the people that come over here. Let's say the TFI folks that come. And how generous and how much quality and how great service and how I marvel at the way it is done because of their consideration for other people. When they don't have any benefit from it except the benefit from the Lord and the blessing and grace of the Lord that comes with this kind of generosity and consideration and this kind of love that is not about us, but it's about them. It's not about them, but it's about other people. And I love that so much because it is Christ-like. God bless you. Kiss.